They used to call me the bank of the family. Every Thanksgiving, every overdue bill, every college fee, I paid it. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I believed love meant showing up when others couldn't. I believed family meant never letting anyone go to bed hungry. And for years, I kept everyone afloat. But the day my world collapsed, they vanished. No calls, no visits, just whispers, gossip, and the sharp sting of mockery. Before the fall, I was the invisible pillar, the one they leaned on but never asked if I was tired. I remember one Christmas. I paid for gifts for 5 households, cooked dinner, and left with nothing but an empty tank and a quiet ride home. They smiled, took photos, laughed. No one asked how I was doing. You know what no one tells you? That being the strong one is lonely. One time I got into a car accident. I called my brother from the ER. He picked up, laughed, and said, "You're always dramatic. I'm at a cookout. Call me later." I bled that day. Not from the cut on my forehead, but from that moment. That moment, I knew I was just a wallet to them. My birthday came during the worst part of the collapse. I posted nothing. Not a single person called. Later that night, my sister posted a picture from a spa day. Caption, "Sometimes peace means deleting dead weight." That's when it hit me. I wasn't just abandoned. I was erased. Then the market crashed. My biggest properties turned to ash. A lawsuit I didn't see coming drained my savings. My health gave out next. I was grinding myself to the bone, trying to stay above water. I texted my sister for help, left voicemails for my mom. Not even a reply. I overheard them laughing about me at a family cookout. "Miss Boss Lady now can't even pay rent." That's when the depression came. I sold my car, moved into a friend's basement, skipped meals. But the worst part, the silence. Silence from those I once saved. I went to the dollar store with loose change to buy ramen. I heard someone say, "She used to drive a Benz, now she's counting coins like the rest of us." It was my cousin's wife. I didn't even look up. I just kept counting. 95, 96, 97 cents. That bag of noodles might have been small, but it fed me for 2 days, and their words, they fed the fire inside me. One night, I sat outside a church I couldn't afford to enter. I heard a woman praying inside, loud, emotional. "God, remember the one who used to help everybody. She's somewhere out there crying." I never knew who she was, but I cried like she was praying just for me. I slept on a couch in a stranger's apartment I found on Craigslist. I'd go days without talking to anyone. Once I walked 3 miles to a job interview in heels in the snow just to be told I was overqualified. And still, my family never called. They buried me before I died. But something in me refused to die. I found an old notebook filled with goals. I signed up for free online courses, learned digital marketing at night, worked for clients who didn't even know my real name. I stopped trying to be who they remembered. I started becoming who I needed. At first, it was small wins, a $200 gig, then $1,000. Then, a former client introduced me to a tech investor. They gave me a shot. I built a campaign that went viral. One day, my account jumped to $340,000. I fell to my knees, and I cried. Not because I was rich, but because I was whole again. I bought a used car, simple, reliable. Drove to my mom's old house. She was outside arguing with a landlord. I parked across the street. She didn't see me. I watched her crumble. I wanted to run to her, but a voice inside said, "She chose silence when you needed sound." I drove away, in tears, not in bitterness, but in peace. I woke up to a $2.3 million deposit from a startup I had invested in years ago. I just stared at the screen, my fingers shaking. I cried, not for the money, but for the woman who survived. I bought a home again, quiet on a hill. No one knew. I built a nonprofit for women in tech. I started funding scholarships anonymously. Then, the calls started. First my brother, then my sister, my mom. "We miss you." No mention of the past, no apologies, just, "Can you help us again?" And my God, the nerve they had. They added me back to the family group chat. No warning, just a "Hey sis. Long time." My cousin sent a blurry flyer, a GoFundMe. My sister's son needed surgery. I froze, not because I didn't care, but because when my appendix burst 2 years ago, in a public hospital, no one showed up. I read every message in the chat. "She can easily help. She's just holding a grudge." But no one said we failed her. That was when I knew. They hadn't changed. They were just desperate. I decided to forgive them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. I told my mom gently, "I love you, but I can't be your bank anymore." She cried. I did too, but But I didn't change my mind. At a charity ball, they honored me with a plaque for funding hope when the world turned its back. I stood on stage in the same city where my family once mocked me. That night, I wrote a check big enough to fund 2 girls' homes and 3 scholarships. My mom called the next morning, said, "We saw you on the news, you looked successful." I said, "I am, because I stopped chasing people who only clap when you're paying their bill." One day, I was at a bookstore, signing copies of my book. My sister walked in quietly with sunken eyes, visibly aged. She waited in line, like a stranger. When she reached the table, she whispered, "I'm sorry, I thought you'd never bounce back." I looked at her, her once glowing skin now dulled by stress. She wore the same coat from 5 years ago. I didn't gloat. I just said, "You thought wrong." She nodded, tears swelling. "I miss you." I signed her book. Some bridges are better remembered in ash, and I moved on to the next person in line. Now, they watch from afar. They scroll through the interviews. They see the ribbon cuttings. They post throwbacks with me like I still sit at their table. But I don't. I dine with women who once had nothing just like me, and they live with a memory of the day they turned away, a memory that doesn't let them rest. One time I saw my mother at the grocery store. She didn't say a word. She looked at the floor, because shame speaks louder in silence than any insult ever could. And I didn't need revenge. They already carry it. If you've ever been the strong one, and they disappeared when you fell, let them go. Rise, rebuild, and when you make it back, pour your love into places that never mocked your empty hand. Because one day, they will watch you rise. From behind glass, they can't reach through, and you won't need to say a word. I'm Vanessa. I was laughed at, forgotten, erased, and now, I build schools, I shelter women, I fund futures, and my family, they watch, in silence, with empty hands. That is the ending they earned. But even with the silence, with the distance, with the scars, I still think of them sometimes. Not with longing, not with hate, but with the soft ache of what could have been if they had just chosen love over ego. I remember the first Thanksgiving I spent alone. The city felt colder than usual. My fireplace barely worked. But I lit a candle, sat on the floor, and made myself a plate of mashed potatoes and frozen peas. No turkey, no pie, just me. I toasted with water, whispered to no one. To peace. That moment wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Years passed. Success came in waves. Some gentle, some crushing. I gave keynote speeches in cities I once couldn't afford to sleep in. I sat on panels with women who used to intimidate me. I traveled to Switzerland, to Ghana, to Tokyo, places that once felt like dreams behind glass. And yet, every time I boarded a plane, I thought of how I once walked 3 miles in heels just for someone to tell me I was too much for their company. Funny how the world tells you you're too much when you're struggling, and not enough when you stop giving. I started mentoring girls from shelters. They reminded me of me. Bright eyes dulled by betrayal, hearts still soft, despite the world's cruelty. One of them asked me, "Do people change?" I told her the truth. Sometimes. But don't wait around for it. I saw myself in her silence. Sometimes. At night, I'd dream of my mother, not as the woman who turned her back, but as the one who once kissed my forehead after nightmares. I dreamed of her braiding my hair, humming gospel softly, before everything broke. And in those dreams, I forgave her all over again. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It doesn't come with trumpets or confetti. It arrives quietly, like the first snow. One day, you just stop bleeding when you think of them. And that is the real victory. I once ran into my cousin's wife, the one from the dollar store. This time, I was in a black blazer, fresh off a meeting with investors. She didn't recognize me. Not until I said, "Ramen's still my favorite." Her face turned a shade paler. I smiled, not with smugness, but with peace. "Hope you're well," and I walked away. My name was now being whispered in rooms I used to beg to enter. At conferences, in Forbes articles, in universities I once couldn't afford to apply to. People started calling me self-made. I corrected them, every time. I wasn't self-made, I was survival-made. One day, I visited the church where I once heard that woman pray. It was still there, smaller than I remembered. I donated quietly, no name, just a note. For the one who prayed for me when no one else did. Then came the book deal. A major publisher, a 6-figure advance. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I lit that same candle from my first alone Thanksgiving, held the first copy in my hands, and whispered again, "To peace." The media painted me as a phoenix, rising from ashes, but they didn't see the nights I couldn't sleep, the meals skipped, The panic attacks in hotel bathrooms. They didn't see the therapy sessions where I asked, is it wrong to never want to go back? I still remember the day I visited my childhood home. Not to reconnect, but to let go. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged. I touched the old mailbox. Inside, a letter addressed to Vanessa J. Postmarked 3 years ago. I opened it. My niece had written it. A child's scrawl. Auntie, I miss you. Mommy says you're mad at us, but I just want you to come back. My hands shook. I didn't cry. I smiled, folded the letter, tucked it into my coat. That day, I didn't knock, but I forgave a little more. Sometimes, grief is not for the dead. It's for the living people who refuse to show up. And then came love. Not the kind that sweeps you off your feet, the kind that walks beside you. He was soft-spoken, listened more than he spoke. The first time he saw me cry, he didn't try to fix it. He just stayed, and that was enough. I told him everything. The betrayal, the ramen, the silence. He held my hand and said, "You are not hard to love." They were just too blind to see. That night, I cried. Not from pain, but from the shock of being seen. We married quietly, no family invites, just friends who had become family. A simple ceremony under a maple tree. No drama, no speeches, just vows written from years of loneliness and healing. I changed my last name, not for him, but for me. A shedding, a rebirth. Later, when I was interviewed on national TV, the host asked me, "What would you say to your family now?" I paused, looked into the camera, and said, "I wish you well, truly. But I am no longer your source. I am my own." The clip went viral. Messages poured in. Thousands, from people who had been the strong one, who were laughed at, forgotten, mocked when they fell. They called me brave. I called them survivors. I launched a foundation, Rise First. It wasn't just for women in tech anymore. It was for anyone who had been left behind. We offered housing, therapy, scholarships, but most of all, we offered belief, and that changed everything. One afternoon, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address, but I knew the handwriting. My mother's. It said, "I don't ask for money, I don't ask for anything. I just want to know if you're happy." I read it 3 times, then once more. I didn't write back. I didn't have to. Some doors are best left gently closed, but I didn't stop loving her. That's the part people never understand. You can love someone deeply, and still walk away, because love should never come at the cost of your soul. I visited her grave 2 years later. She passed without ever seeing me again. I brought lilies, not for her approval, but because she once told me they were her favorite. I stood in silence, said a prayer, whispered, "I love you, but I love me now too." The tears came, but so did the peace. One night, I was asked to speak at a graduation, a room full of girls in caps too big for their heads, eyes filled with dreams. I told them, "You will be told you're too much, you'll be used, betrayed. But remember this, resilience isn't loud. Sometimes it's just showing up the next day when no one clapped the night before." The applause lasted 5 minutes, but the looks in their eyes, that lasted forever. And now, my days are slower, softer. I drink tea on my porch. I wake up to birds instead of anxiety. I read letters from girls whose lives changed because I dared to keep breathing. One wrote, "I saw myself in you, and now I see a future, and that's worth more than any apology that never came." Some days, I do still remember. The betrayal, the silence, the spa day post, the GoFundMe guilt trips. But those memories no longer haunt me. They just remind me how far I've come. If you're still in your silent season, I want you to know this is not your ending. You will rise. You will learn that being the strong one was never a curse. It was training. You were learning how to survive fire, so one day, you could light someone else's way. I am Vanessa. Once the bank, now the builder. Once erased, now a name they teach in schools. Once broken, now whole. And the family that left me behind. They scroll, they whisper, they remember, but they do not return. Because some bridges were never meant to carry them into your future. And I keep building. I keep loving. I keep rising. In silence, in strength, in full bloom. Because the best revenge was never revenge at all. It was peace. But peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's a war you fight within. You see, after the speeches and the spotlight faded, there were nights when the silence didn't feel peaceful at all. It felt hollow, like a large empty room where echoes of my past bounced off the walls, louder than I expected. No one warned me that healing could be loud. That memory didn't always respect the boundaries I'd built. One night I was walking through my new home, barefoot, lights dimmed, listening to Billie Holiday crackle from a record player, and I passed the mirror. I stopped, looked at myself, and for the first time in years, I asked, who am I without the pain? I didn't know. I'd spent so long proving them wrong. I forgot to learn who I really was, so I unplugged. From the press, from social media, from the applause. I took a 6-month sabbatical, booked a tiny cabin up in Oregon, deep in the woods. No internet, no signal, just pine trees, coffee in tin mugs, and the sound of my own breathing. I needed to know if I still existed without the grind. Without the grind, was I still valuable? Without the hustle, was I still enough? That first week I couldn't sleep. My fingers twitched, missing the feel of a laptop. My brain kept making to-do lists. But slowly, nature did her thing. I started waking with the sun, walking barefoot in dew-soaked grass. I wrote letters I never sent. I cried over old journals. I screamed into the trees once, just to hear my voice bounce back, just to know I still had one. On the 21st night, I had a dream. I was sitting on a bench. A young girl sat beside me. She looked like me, maybe 12 years old. Her shoes were worn, her hair uncombed. She looked at me and asked, "Did we make it?" And I whispered, "Yes, we did." She smiled, held my hand, and said, "Don't forget me when you go back." Then she vanished. I woke up sobbing, because for all my achievements, I had abandoned her, the girl I used to be, the one who stayed up late hiding overdue bills, the one who ate cereal with water because the milk was spoiled, the one who heard arguments through paper-thin walls and made herself small to survive. That cabin saved me. It reminded me that my power didn't come from being the strong one. It came from being human, flawed, afraid, but relentless. When I returned to the city, I wasn't the same. I no longer chased meetings just to feel needed. I no longer opened emails during dinner. I no longer gave energy to people who couldn't say thank you. My boundaries became gates, not walls, gates I could open for the worthy and shut for the toxic. One afternoon, my assistant told me there was a young woman downstairs asking to meet me. She had no appointment. I almost said no, but something in her name stopped me. Naomi, my grandmother's name. She walked in, nervous, clutching a note. "I'm sorry," she blurted. "I know I wasn't on your calendar, but I read your book, and I had to come." I gestured for her to sit. She did. "I live with my aunt. She calls me useless, says I'll never make it. I'm trying to start a design business, but every time I post something, my own family mocks me." Her voice cracked. "But your book, it gave me hope." And just like that, I saw the 12-year-old me again, not in the mirror this time, but in Naomi's eyes. We talked for hours. I gave her my card, said, "Send me your work." 2 weeks later she did, and she was brilliant. I hired her to design for my foundation, gave her first big paycheck. Her aunt called me the next day, asking if she could mentor more of the girls in the family. I laughed, politely declined, and blocked her number. Because sometimes, cycles only break when we stop inviting them in. Naomi thrived, and I remembered what power really is, giving others what no one gave you. My husband and I adopted 2 daughters later that year, sisters. Abandoned. One of them didn't speak for the first 3 months, just stared at me like she didn't believe I'd stay. I did, every night, sat beside her bed, braided her hair in silence. One evening she reached out and whispered, "You smell like peace." I cried. Motherhood taught me the kind of love that doesn't perform, it just holds. I was standing in the kitchen one morning, holding my youngest, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but I answered. A quiet voice. "Vanessa, it's your brother." I froze. "Mom left something for you, before she passed." A box. I didn't know what to do with it. Silence. "I can mail it, or you can come get it." My chest tightened. I hadn't seen him in over 7 years. I agreed. I didn't go alone. My husband held my hand the whole way. As we pulled into the old driveway, I felt the ghosts rise. Every argument, every cold shoulder, every betrayal. My brother came out slowly, older, thinner, his eyes softer. He didn't hug me, just handed me the box. "I'm sorry," he said, barely above a whisper. "I thought you were supposed to save us. I didn't realize you needed saving too." That was the closest thing to an apology I ever got. I nodded, took the box, and left. Inside were letters, journals, my mother. One page caught my eye. It read, "I was cruel to Vanessa because I envied her strength. I called her selfish, But truthfully, I was afraid she'd leave us behind, and she did. And I don't blame her. That night, I wept for a woman who never said those words aloud, but finally wrote them down. Closure doesn't always come from conversations. Sometimes it comes from ink and paper. Years passed. I built 3 schools, started a digital scholarship fund that reached 12. Naomi now leads her own company, hiring girls from the very neighborhoods that once mocked her. My daughters, thriving. One plays piano, the other writes poetry. Every morning, they kiss my cheek and say thanks for being our mom. And every time, I think thank God I didn't give up. I once gave everything to people who saw me as a wallet. Now I give to those who see me as a warrior. There's a difference. One night, I was speaking at a gala, hundreds of people in gowns and tuxedos, cameras, applause, flashing lights. I stood behind the podium, looked at the audience, and I told the truth. There was a time when I thought I had to earn love by bleeding, by sacrificing, by breaking myself just to keep others whole. But now I know, love doesn't demand you shrink. It doesn't mock your wounds. It doesn't vanish in crisis. Real love remains. And they rose to their feet, not because I was famous, but because I was free. After the event, a man approached me, tears in his eyes. He said, "I'm the father of the girl your scholarship saved. She wants to be like you." I smiled, but inside, I broke, because that little girl would never know the ramen days, the couch nights, the ER calls that went unanswered. She'd only know the power of possibility, and that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not validation, just to turn my ashes into someone else's. I'm not the strong one anymore. I'm the healed one. And that, my friend, is far more dangerous. So if you're watching this, and you're in your fall season, if your hands are shaking from betrayal, if your inbox is empty when you cry for help, if your name is only mentioned when your wallet is, let me remind you of this. You are not too much. You are not alone. You are not done. Keep building in silence. Let them underestimate you. Let them erase you. Because one day, they will Google your name, and it will return results they never believed possible. And that glass, the one they watched you through, they'll still be behind it, while you'll be soaring, unafraid, unbothered, unreachable, unapologetic. I am Vanessa. I am peace. I am proof. And now, I am unstoppable. But being unstoppable doesn't mean you don't get tired. It means you know where to pour your energy. I poured mine into quiet things. The things that didn't need applause. Like Sunday mornings with my girls baking pancakes in pajamas. Like planting herbs in the backyard, watching life grow from soil. Like teaching young women how to pitch their ideas, not their trauma. But the world never stops testing you. One rainy afternoon, I got an email. Subject: urgent request, family matter. It was from my cousin, the same one who once laughed at me for counting coins at the dollar store. His daughter had been arrested, wrong place, wrong time. A case of mistaken identity, or so he claimed. He begged me for help. Legal fees. A lawyer. A statement to the press. You're the only one with power, he wrote. Don't punish my daughter for my mistakes. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew the price of caring. I replied, I'll help her. Not for you, but because no child should suffer for the bitterness of adults. And I did, quietly, anonymously. I paid her legal fees. Hired a defense team. She was released 3 weeks later. Her father never said thank you. But 3 months after, she sent me a letter, handwritten. She called me her silent guardian, said she was starting college. Not because I believe in myself yet, but because you believed in me first. That letter is framed in my office. Because not all seeds bloom where you planted them. Some take root in places you'll never see. Life was moving in rhythms I finally understood. My daughters were thriving. Naomi was about to open her 3rd design studio. My husband and I were planning a retreat for survivors of toxic families. And then, a headline changed everything. Former family of tech mogul Vanessa launches Tell-All podcast. My face, on a banner, right under the word abandoned. I clicked. My brother, my sister, 2 cousins, all sitting in a dimly lit room, microphones in front of them, spinning a web of half-truths. She changed. My brother said. She thinks she's better than us, my sister added. We were there for her, one cousin lied. She used to cry on my shoulder, the other chimed in. And now, she won't even pick up the phone. I didn't feel rage, I felt pity, because this was the only way they knew to be seen, by tying themselves to the woman they once ignored. The podcast spread. The clips were stitched into videos. Debates erupted online. Strangers took sides. Some defended me. Others called me cold. A few even accused me of fabricating my story for sympathy. One tweet read, "Why would a successful woman abandon her own mother unless she was guilty of something?" That one stung. Not because it was true, but because once upon a time, I would have believed it myself. The foundation board offered to release a statement. I declined. My publicist asked if I wanted to sue. I didn't. Because every minute spent explaining myself to people who never cared to understand is a minute stolen from those who do. I let the noise rage, and I went back to work. But that week, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of their words, but because I knew the weight they carried for others. I received a message from a woman in Detroit. She wrote, "I was going to return to my abusive father's house because everyone told me I was selfish for staying away. Then I saw how you didn't answer back, and I thought, maybe I don't have to defend myself either. Maybe healing is its own answer." I cried, because that's what I'd forgotten. My silence wasn't weakness, it was permission for others to choose peace over performance. And peace began to look like something new. Not quiet, not lonely, but full, like when my daughter stood in front of her class and said, "My mom saves lives, not with medicine, but with second chances." Like when a woman I once mentored invited me to her wedding and walked down the aisle with both her hands in the air shouting, "I am not what they did to me." Like when I stood in front of 10,000 people at a tech summit and said, "Let's stop glorifying survival and start funding softness." Because strength isn't just about climbing out of the fire. It's about learning to live in the sunlight. One summer evening, I was invited to speak at a university commencement, the same university that once rejected my application because I didn't demonstrate potential. They paid me 6 figures to deliver the keynote. As I stood on stage, I spotted my old guidance counselor in the crowd. He once told me to be realistic when I said I wanted to own a business. He clapped the loudest. After the ceremony, a student approached me, eyes wide, voice trembling. "I don't have a question," she said. "I just want to stand beside you." So one day, I can tell myself, I stood beside a woman who made it. We took a picture. I framed it beside the one from my dollar store day. Because both were me, and both mattered. That fall, I was invited to the White House. They wanted to honor me for contributions to tech education. I wore a simple navy dress, no diamonds, just the same heels I wore to that interview in the snow years ago. I kept them, as a reminder of the girl who never gave up. As I stood in the East Room, surrounded by dignitaries, cameras flashing, I thought of my sister's words from that spa photo. "Sometimes peace means deleting dead weight." I whispered back, under my breath, "Sometimes peace means becoming too heavy for their lies to carry." After the ceremony, a reporter asked, "What's your secret to success?" I smiled. "There is no secret, just scars." I left it at that. But life has a way of circling back. One crisp November morning, I received a letter from a hospice center. My aunt, my mother's sister, was dying. She requested to see me. I wrestled with the decision. This was the same woman who once told me I was damaged goods after I left my first abusive relationship, who said I'd never find a man who could tolerate a woman so loud, but not for closure, but for clarity. She was frail, skin like parchment, eyes dim, but familiar. She reached for my hand. I let her. She whispered, "You broke the curse." "What curse?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "The one we all carry. The one where we teach our daughters that love is pain, that silence is strength, that sacrifice is the only language women speak. You didn't speak it, and we hated you for it, but you were right." I held her hand until her breathing slowed, and in that moment, I felt the curse lift. Not from her, but from me. Because when you break generational patterns, you don't just heal yourself. You heal everyone who comes after. That night, I lit a candle. Same one as always. Sat on my porch. My daughters beside me, and I whispered, to softness, to survive, to starting over. And for the first time in a long time, the wind felt warm. If this story touched you in any way, don't leave without joining this community. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remind each other that pain doesn't have the final word. Thank you for watching.